What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the 10th installment of Dark Horse Discourse. So, I have been struggling with the flu, so I figured I'd kind of make it more of a chill, easy stream tonight. Do some EFAPing and just kind of do some Q&A in case folks have any questions for myself on any topics or about me as a person or creator. But yeah, didn't really have the energy or the time to really prepare some of the other segments I like to do during the stream. So yeah, just kind of keep it simple and easy. But yeah, hopefully we'll have some typical fun from it, and we'll see if some agitators pop up in the chat to give us some even more entertainment because always tends to happen every week. Well, let's check in the chat. So we had Zombie Boy here. What's going on? We had Frog Tony. Welcome, man. Baki, how's it going? Mr. Matt Cisco, thanks for being here. Yo, Galaxy Stranger, welcome. And Glass Machine. All right, cool. So first, let's talk about some cool things I picked up this week. So we've got Family Values, Sin City, of course. Another masterpiece by Frank Miller. Really enjoying that so far, of course. And then found a really cool retro toy shop. For anybody that's in Michigan, anyone that's familiar with Utica, make sure, and I'll have to look up the name of the store here, but found this really cool retro toy store, and it's like a two-story, and it's got, I mean, we're talking the old Star Wars, Star Trek toys. I mean, stuff going back even to the 50s, and then more recent toys as well. But like, you know, you come across some cool comic and toy shops that have a little bit of everything, but this shop was just, it was awesome. It was just so many retro toys. I mean, I spent a good like hour and a half there with my kid. Just it was one of those places where you're like, man, I wish I could just drop hundreds of dollars. There's so many cool things that you want to collect and put up on your shelves and stuff. But just really cool store. So let me look up the name there for folks. Um, but one of the things I found there was this really cool Batman versus Superman Batman figurine here. So nice large one that I'll eventually put up on one of my shelves. That was a nice little catch there. Find this place for you guys here. Let's see. So I checked out a place called Funky Town Toys, which was actually quite cool. Had some comics as well, um, right there in Utica. But the other store is actually within like walking distance, which was really cool. So it's called Sarge and Red's Toys and Collectibles. And the place really sticks out when you're driving by it, but highly recommend folks that are in the southeastern, like Michigan area, check out this toy shop and very like good prices too for like a resale shop. And most of the stuff is brand new, unopened. So yeah, definitely check that out. Sarge and Red's Toys and Collectibles, one of the coolest shops I've ever been in. And the one thing that I could not resist, I eventually want to collect like all the gargoyle, the NECA toys, but this one I just had to cave in and buy. It's the one, you can't really see it real well, but it's more the like metallized version of him. So he really kind of looks like he's in like stone figure here, but really cool action figure with like it's got a removable and interchangeable head and a couple other items, but really cool Goliath toy there. So now I'm gonna end up buying one probably every month or so. Once you start collecting stuff like that, you can't stop. I move so frequently though that like I have to purposely not like stockpile a bunch of collectibles because you know it's just more stuff to move, potentially damage, but eventually I'm gonna go buck wild and just get all those toys I had as a kid or always wanted. Like there they had, it was like the from the '90s, Star Trek series, whether it's Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, but they had the models of the like shuttlecraft and all the different ships, and it's like I would love to have a whole section of a room dedicated to the old. Well, I don't want to say old Star Trek toys and figures, but the late '80s and then '90s through Enterprise because I absolutely love all of those shows. So and those, ironically, I guess this is my nerd confession. I can't go to sleep at night without watching one of those Star Trek series. Very hard for me to sleep at night in general, but there's something about those TV series that I put it on my phone or tablet or something. It just like completely relaxes me. Stop thinking about anything and everything. And it's just like pure like nostalgia overload to where I'm just like, good memories, good feelings, just relaxes me. And within like 15 minutes, I'm out. So, and yeah, exactly, Eric. Real Star Trek. Yep, as it should have been. But yeah, great stuff. Got some more people here in the chat, and yeah, Shadowpunk. It was Sage and Reds in Utica. And Timescales, how's it going? Welcome. I don't know. He was really here last week. I mean, solid hour and a half straight. So I maybe he's streaming, but I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up. But I think you guys definitely challenged him enough to where he may have just given up because you guys were really giving it to him. It was quite enjoyable, especially it, like it's hard enough to keep up with the chat, which I'm now finding out, but it's really hard to not just sit there and read the chat and laugh and almost forget that you're streaming because it's so entertaining. Just like when you're watching, other people's streams, you just get caught up in the chat and laughing at the back and forth, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I gotta talk. I'm streaming." So Eric says we have a place like that called Acme Toys and Comics, a little north of Orlando. Nice. Gonna be in Florida here shortly. I'll have to jot that down and check that out. Oh, nice. Yep, got the Superman version. Hmm. Thank you for pushing the link. Appreciate that. We have Flady in the house. Welcome. We have Jimmy the Lumberjack looking smug as normal. Yeah, I can't help it, I guess. Can't help it. Mikey Goetz, welcome. And then we have Michael, welcome. Yeah, X Files. Never did get into that. But I mean, I was really young when that had came out. But I will have to revisit that now as a, I guess, middle aged man. Galaxy Stranger says my dad brought me up on the original series because it came up in the '80s when there was only one track. Yep. Mhm. We have Stormtrooper Julian Caesar. Welcome. Oh, we got Amazing Gaming Productions. Welcome. And yeah, just shipped out his order for Vigilantes Creed. So yeah, thank you for your support. Um, very, very appreciative. It's going right to uh, a page for the line art and inking for the first full comic. So it's awesome, especially right now. I mean, the campaign does close a week from tomorrow, but every order I get, it's just like, there's, a portion of a page or a full page covered. So it's exciting being on like kind of approaching your second campaign where you can have that mindset and just enjoy like, yep, that's another page that's covered, and you just get that excitedness about seeing another completed page in the near future. So, but yeah, appreciate the support. So yeah, what I wanted to do was EFAP a couple Eric July videos. The first one, you've seen a lot of little clips on Twitter. I've only saw bits and pieces of them. I wanted to actually save watching the videos until doing a stream, and it's his video based around manga, why it took over, and what American comics must learn. Because he's already an expert in American comics. Um, and I thought he was passionate about American comics, but now he's going to publish a manga, so that's interesting. But I don't think the timing was a coincidence of this video. He released it 2 weeks ago. He's been really talking up manga, which makes sense, right? Because now he's going to be pushing manga to gain sales and make money from it. Not a bad idea from a business perspective, potentially. I don't know if there's a lot of crossover from his existing audience to manga, but then again, a lot of the people that were buying his books, right, they're buying them because of his name and presence, not so much because they're passionate about comics. But again, his reader base is getting so much smaller that, uh, you know, looking at the like Great War of Separation and even Yaira 2, I don't think introducing a completely new type of book, let's say, right, it is going to make a huge splash. I think he's banking on true manga readers getting interested in this, right? But I don't know if a lot of manga folks are keeping an eye on him, and I don't know if this particular book or this property, right? This was it Gabriel and the Guardians being more of a Christian based and all that is if that's really going to appeal. Because from my knowledge, a lot of manga, anime, or whatever is not really Christian based. Or it doesn't push Christianity, right? Because a lot of it is stemmed from Japanese culture and all that. So will be interesting to see if many people will gravitate towards it. It did have, I believe, the anime or animation series that's being created by Angel Studios had a crowdfunding campaign and it only raised 500,000. Now, I'm not balking at the fact that it made 500,000 just for animation. That's not going to go that far in comparison to obviously a comic. So, and the trailer, the announcement to me was kind of, I mean, it wasn't a surprise in how he did it, but it was as it was almost as if he was just promoting the animation. Right, and I get that that's, like, the biggest pitch is like, "Oh, it's already gonna be animated, look at the graphics," but there was, what, maybe 2, 3 seconds of actual art, and it was just, like, quick flashes, like, of an up close, like, face piece of art, and I thought that the rule to be part of Ripasend was had to be 100% complete, right? These people that work with Ripasend have to have their shit together, right? So there should be a ton of art. I mean, he should have been able to show several pages really to entice manga readers. I'm just gonna say manga, but so quite quite interesting. So let me pull this up here and let's go through this video. So it is titled "How Manga Took Over and What American Comics Must Learn." So let me know if there's any audio issues. Should be all set. Quality up. Should be good. All right. Let's check in with the chat real quick before we go into this. Ice on 3 is going to be a banger. Yeah, I saw that really, really short teaser, which looked like it was primarily art from ISOM 2 and then like one close up of, Isom just like struggling with life or something. Kind of reminded me of that Superman teaser, right, where he's like sitting in this fancy apartment. There's this alien monster in the background destroying the city, and he's just like, "Oh, I gotta put my boots on." Like, "Oh, I don't want to be a hero, but I gotta be a hero." Like, do I really have to save this woman? Okay, you've talked me into it, I guess. But yeah, it, and I think he said it. I think the date was like a week from now, or like it was in the next 2 weeks. Just like poof, out of nowhere, it's going to be released, and you're like, wow, that's not a lot of time to really build up hype. I mean, there hasn't been much hype around Ice on 3, to be honest, anyways, but uh, geez, like that's so abrupt. And it's like you have this manga being announced. You have Ice on 3, you had his slew of titles, and it's like, well, what happened to the previously supposed like Ripperson projects? Like, are they just being kind of delayed, put off to the side? Um, I don't know. Like, if I was a creator, now again, he hasn't announced any small creators for Ripperson, right? It's only large YouTubers so far, and then a a film studio, right? So bigger names with a big following and potential clout attached to them. But if I was going to be using Ripasend and I wasn't like a already well-known, well-established creator or name, I'd be really concerned, right? That it could just choose to just push yours aside or delay it at their convenience, right? Because it's the release schedule is going to be based off of what is going to be the most profitable for Ripasend. So that would be concerning and scary. So, and that's where you would lack independence as well, right? Um, Especially if you already signed a contract or whatnot. Um, yeah, you're just everything's going to rely on what Ripasend wants, not necessarily what you want or when you're ready to release it or how you want it to be released. So I would hate to be in that position as a independent creator. Just I don't know, take that personal control over your project away. So Eric says manga took over because American comics embrace woke. Simple as that. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I do think the anime shows definitely helped, right? With Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, things of that nature that really blew up and caught the attention of American kids. And they got attached to those properties and it kind of opened up their minds to considering reading manga if they were already into comics or considering reading comics. And that's the problem, right? Is even though DC, even Marvel continued to put out some really great animated movies, their comics were going down the drain because again, yeah, they were pushing a lot of woke ideology. They were not focusing on the legacy characters and traditional heroism, whereas the Japanese, well, they tend to preserve their culture much better. So yeah, it is quite simple. Yep, I agree. They definitely will. We also have Grogu. Welcome. So Timescale says my wife, Japanese, pronounces manga as manga instead of manga, as well as other Japanese people in stores. So I think that is correct. All right. So Grogu says if it looks like the Legend of Korra, that's not anime. It's Western animation that's stylized or inspired by the East. And I've seen many comments about that as well on Twitter, where it's like pitched as anime, but the actual animation is not really anime. It's just kind of trying to copy it. There's a little bit of styling to it that makes it appear to be anime. So, Rockstar creators. Uh, what's going on, Corey? Welcome. Yep, very true. And that's the thing, right? And again, I'm not interested in manga. Um, I've talked about that before, so I have no interest in reading it, creating it. But my understanding is manga is just Japanese comics made by the Japanese. They have their own styling and ways of creating their comics, but it is kind of funny when American creators will say they're making a manga when right they're not Japanese and they're just trying to kind of piggyback off of it in terms of trying to find ways to market it. So, but yeah, let's jump into this video.
It's no secret that the American comic book industry has seen better days. Some people have completely given up on it. They believe everybody that participates in it has hopped on a sinking ship and they're largely wasting their time. In other words, it's a lost cause. But I'm a lot more optimistic than others. That said, I'm a realist. I recognize that a lot has to happen in order for it to turn around. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Eric July, and I'm the founder and owner of Rippaverse Publishing. We're a relatively new comic book company that launched in 2022, and since then, we've sold well over 200,000 total books and made over $10 million in total sales. So I have a lot of skin in the game, and in an industry that is supposedly dying, we've been able to see success. This is going to...
It's always just about the dollar figures, right? Personally, you know, I'd want to talk about my actual IP, right? I'd be like, hey, Vigilantes Creed, right? Really pushing the name and the creation. You would think he'd want to really push like ice on like, hey, the success of titles A, B, and C, you know, the popularity of characters A, B, and C. But it's like, it's always that like, oh, $10 million.
To be a generally positive video, I'll talk about what I think caused the issues and I'll propose some actual solutions. I'll also dispel of some common myths and give you my opinion on other factors. Let's get into it. The obvious thing that people should point to is the success of manga in the West. This shows that there isn't a demand issue. People still read comics and are willing to pay for the books. So there has to be some sort of disconnect that has this younger generation.
Of course, they put a Japanese kid in it. Oh, it's just funny.
Preferring Japanese comics over the American ones, as well as the...
Well, and again, that's this is a good example of what I talked about, you know, a second ago.
Preferring Japanese.
I mean, that's Pokemon, you know. So that makes sense that kids would gravitate towards things like Pokemon because that was a monster hit. I mean, I was obsessed with it as a kid. But that has nothing to do with kids not liking Western comics. It's that kids are growing up on Pokemon because of the animated series, and then they want to read it as well. Just like when I was a kid, I wanted to draw Pokemon because I really loved the show, and that's why I wanted to collect the cards. And there's still kids that are going to be watching the animated series of Spider-Man and all that, and they're going to grow up wanting to read Western comics.
Comics over the American ones, as well as the more adult customers. All that said, though I do think getting the attention of younger generations is important, the entire industry doesn't need to hinge on it just because they did in the past. While it's true that young fans turn into older fans, you can still have geek culture.
Yeah, that's a Marvel book, but I'm sure he caught that.
Industries that trend towards older teenagers and adults and still see a lot of success. Warhammer 40K is an example of this. Another thing that I think is overstated is the variety issue. Superhero comics are the most in-demand comic, much like shonen style mangas are the most in-demand mangas. Yet there exist all sorts of other mangas, from sports to food. Likewise, there's plenty of variety in American comics. There exists all types of different comics out there, so the lack of variety is not only overstated, it's just flat out incorrect. I think a lot of these myths stem from people not wanting to accept some harsh realities. And I think
What's going on with it? The bridge of his nose there. Jeez. looks like a Star Trek race there or something. Jeez. Come on.
Solutions require proper analyzing of the American comic book industry and mangas. Both have unique attributes, so it's not about simply copying what the Japanese have done. In a lot of cases, some of what they do was influenced by old American cartoonists and traditions anyway. One thing that I don't think...
A lot of this you could just respond with, well, no shit, Sherlock. Of course, Japanese comics have been influenced by American comics and vice versa. That's very, very common.
Is talked about enough is how it became somewhat of a detriment that the market share has been absolutely dominated by only two publishers for several decades. Sure, This could be due to many different factors, but that's what just happened. The entire industry.
That's definitely the only good and valuable part of this whole video. Classic Man of Steel. So Crazy Cat says superhero comics have dominated the West and has handicapped the American comic market. Deny that is just ignorance. So the thing is, but that's a result of, again, pushing political ideologies. If they would have continued to make comics in the same fashion as they did in the 80s and the 90s, still focusing on creators, right, such as Moore, Miller, Silvestri, Liefeld, the folks that were not trying to push anything in the books other than just traditional heroes and traditional storylines, we wouldn't have had any issues. Same thing goes for the films, right? They've went down so many avenues in a poor fashion for the films that people have just lost interest. It's the combination of the two. If they were to release a book in the next 6 months by Silvestri, then yeah, it would get huge sales. It would do very well. If they were to release another Snyder film or Nolan film pushing no wokeness or political bullshit, it would make $1 billion guaranteed. People are just tired of the lazy books filled with garbage. That's it. And if that is 75 to 90% of what they continue to release in comics and films, what are people going to do? They're just going to reconsume legacy comics and legacy films. That's exactly what I do. I go back and I collect books by Frank Miller, by Alan Moore, right? And I just read them over and over. I rewatch the Snyderverse and the Nolan films and the Endgame films, right? Or up until Endgame films over and over. Just recycle them because they're going to be more entertaining than a new film by a creative team that is not passionate about the characters, that they don't give a shit about the story. That's what is damaging American comics. It would be extremely easy for them to fix it. The problem is the big two, they do not want to pay what they used to pay artists. They don't want to take that risk of falling on their ass financially, but they could easily lean into it and trim the fat. But they, again, are so focused on politics and ideologies, and they've gotten so comfortable with cost savings in the aspect of outsourcing, right, to lower cost countries, cutting corners, not focusing on detail and quality, that they pretty much would have to wipe their management team out and bring in folks, right, from the early 2000s, from the 90s, and just start fresh. That's the only way that they can get back to where they were. And the other thing is folks' age. It's about, the different generations of people, right? People that are in their 60s, 50s, and 40s would easily come back if they brought their favorite creators back. If they actually started creating the books that they fell in love with in the past, they'd get right back on board. They would start going to comic book shops, right? Because they loved comic book shops. So that's what they grew up on. You start making them fall back in love with, I'm going to say, modern American comics, but in the sense of revitalizing them and making them like the traditional comics. That's how you basically bring the industry back to life. But we know the big two are not going to do it anytime soon. Just like they're not doing it with films. It's clear the direction that they're going in. That's not happening in Japan. And you got to also view things in a political sense, right? Look at all the countries that are trying to preserve their cultures. The biggest ones would be Japan, right? The Koreas, Russia, Eastern European countries, for example. They really want to maintain their culture, their traditional values, and the things that built their countries. And in some cases, religion is tied into that. Other aspects can be, straight political. But other parts of Europe and America have went in the other direction. And so when you look at the Japanese culture and manga, right, they are trying to preserve their traditions and their culture. America has not done a good job in that in the last 10, 20 years. Everything is kind of going the opposite. And yeah, I don't see it changing anytime soon, but it's a golden opportunity for indies, right, to provide what those classic fans are missing. The trick is getting it out in front of them, especially if they're not on YouTube, if they're not on Twitter. And that's why, to me, what's most important is getting crowdfunding out in front of more folks so that folks will start shopping crowdfunding and start looking for comics through that method versus comic book shops. And that's the thing that Eric could have done, right? He could have promoted the idea of crowdfunding. He could have gotten crowdfunding in front of his 500,000 YouTube subscribers, right? And really talked it up, really got people into American and Western comics and say, hey, this is the place to be. Go to Indiegogo, go to Fund My Comic, go to Kickstarter. And then, like, hey, here's all the comics I know of. Or, hey, let's do some tweets. Hey, folks, drop in your projects. And then he could even pull those up on his YouTube show. Problem is, it seems like he doesn't have any interest in bringing crowdfunding into light, getting it in front of his subscribers. And so indies are not getting support from big YouTubers like him. We're definitely not getting any support from large conservative creators or content creators, right? Because most of them are just focused on profit. They just care about their own business versus their actual message that they claim to believe in. And that's why American creators are going to continue to struggle, is because a lot of people talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And they're also only focused on themselves versus not just helping others, but helping an industry, helping a culture. Just crying and complaining about mainstream comics and films is not enough to change the culture. It's not enough to change the direction that the industry is going. You have to actually provide alternatives. You have to explain how these companies are doing things wrong, not just complain about them. But yeah, exactly, Matt. He looks at everything through a business sense. Yeah, he does love. He has a lot of phrases that he cannot stop using over and over again. Yep. Galaxy Stranger says we had plenty of anime and manga around when I collected comics in the 80s, 90s. Difference was the American stuff was amazing back then. Now, not so much. Exactly. It's a quality issue, not a quantity issue. Both sides, quantity is not an issue. Quantity is through the roof on both sides. Quality is the issue, which is why myself and others harp on the topic of quality. The lack of quality and care is exactly why the industry is in the position it is in.
Is held up by two publishers, and generations of customers, including myself, were conditioned to only look to them as if they're the only legitimate publishers. From the talent to the customers, it all ran through these publishers. So now the health of the industry rests upon them. And unfortunately, for decades, smaller publishers attempted to replicate this model, which simply doesn't work long term unless you have what they have access to. To further put this into perspective, Shueisha is the biggest manga publisher. At best, they
Did he really just did he have his artists spend time drawing him as a manga character with a Japanese man bun instead of just making art to promote his comics. It's like a big joke. I can't imagine asking someone like, "Hey, can you try to draw me as if I'm Japanese, please?" What is going on with his nose? Like, is there like a huge cyst there in the middle? I don't get it.
Represent only 30% of the market share. 30% is like a floor for either of the big two individually. Even right now, over 60% of the market share are between the big two. Of course, America
Oh boy.
has other publishers, but the makeup is a little more balanced in Japan. On any given year, you'll see a manga that's a top 10 seller that isn't a Shueisha published book. And though it occasionally happens in comics, it's seen as a rarity. And America is far more populated in addition to having different cultures. So you think that it would have a more decentralized market. To really put this into perspective, most of the American top sellers on any given year are based on properties that were created decades ago. Only rarely this isn't the case. With manga and thus anime, you'll see an explosion of properties that were created over the last 10 years. Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, Freerun, Blue Lock, massive successes from different publishers that aren't characters created in the 1960s.
He's back. The chat called it. We knew it would happen. Oh man, let's see what Niobe has to say. So remember, he's at war with me. He's at war with CG. Online wars. More EFAPing the black man. Why is it always about race? And so it's not okay for us to EFAP a black man, but it's okay for him to get art done to make him look as if he's Japanese with Japanese hair. Like, I don't know about that. That seems a little bit iffy. Japanese might find that a little bit offensive. I don't know. For what reason? To ride the coattails of EVS. What does Eric have to do with UBA? Can UCGs do 1 month without bringing up the man's name? So this is really simple. I've already brought it up. Yes, your best friend EVS has brought it up, and others. What he does and says impacts the indie space. Plain and simple. He has the largest following in the indie space, and sadly, his words influence potential backers. And a lot of us do not believe his narrative around crowdfunding and the things that he has said about crowdfunding and crowdfunding creators is good for the indie space. In my opinion, he could be potentially pushing people away from backing crowdfunding campaigns. So that alone is a reason enough to speak out and to speak my mind. I want to bring more people towards crowdfunding, not away from crowdfunding. I don't care if people do pre-orders, I don't care what setup they want to do, but there's absolutely no reason to talk negatively about crowdfunding or talk in a way that could scare people away from backing crowdfunding, right? And now you're going to say, "Oh, well, how is he talk negatively about crowdfunding?" Right? Say, "Oh, I don't know," saying that 99% of crowdfund creators do not have a business bone in their body, basically alluding to the fact that they may not be around in the future. So it could be risky to back them because you don't know if you'll get your book. You don't know if they'll even be around in 3 years. Why back a creator that may not even still be creating in 3 years? Right? There's a lot of reading in between the lines that folks could do to realize he doesn't really have a positive opinion about crowdfunding or the creators in crowdfunding. And that does not help the indie space because why? At least 90% of indie creators rely, or in comics, rely on crowdfunding. So, yes, I'm going to call out anytime I see someone that's potentially damaging crowdfunding with negative narratives. It's really simple.
60s or before. They still have long-standing properties like Dragon Ball and One Piece that do very well. So I don't think this has anything to do with universes or the fact that some of the characters are older and their stories don't end. It's just customer habits are different with the manga audience, and it's something worth exploring. Even with some of the shonen books being very similar, people are still willing to try new things and new properties. Also, with that said, many of the American properties don't help themselves. The constant reboots of universes and books make it nearly impossible for someone new to get in. They don't.
Saying the constant reboots of properties could prevent folks new from getting into like into comics, let's say. I don't think that's the problem. It's how they're rebooting. Actually, a reboot would make it easier for a new reader in modern times to get into the Marvel or DC universe, right? It's a fresh starting point from them. But it's about how they're actually creating the comics and the direction that they're taking it. Reboots are not necessarily an issue, and at some point they always need to do something new and fresh in order to keep interest. I mean, you can't just keep a series going forever. And different artists and different writers may want to take properties in a different direction, right? Can you imagine if they if DC would have decided not to have Frank Miller do his Dark Knight series? I mean, that would have been horrible for business. That would have been horrible for readers. Thank God that they were okay with him doing a more like gritty, dark, down to earth style Batman. And so, but if they're injecting all the new comics with wokeness and with political ideologies and all that nonsense, then yeah, that's what's going to make it harder for new readers to get into the stories and into the universes. That's exactly why I don't buy any new comics. Now, recently, the Absolute, right, Batman and all that, from a marketing perspective, that was really smart. That injected some excitement into DC. It got some readers back into comic shops, and it did get them an injection of sales. And just doing like a different style, different storyline, and all that. It was a good idea for them to do that. I haven't read the book, so I'm not going to comment on the quality, but from a marketing perspective, I could tell that it was good for them. So I don't think that reboots are the problem. It's how they're doing the reboots, it's how they are disrespecting the characters and the storylines. That's the problem.
Don't know where to start. On top of that, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, there's some arrogance to the American creator. They always feel as if they're the center of attention, so they must leave their imprint on these characters. So you can watch a movie on a comic book character and then read the book, and you'll be dealing with two completely different characters that only share the same name. With manga, there's this expectation that the anime is to respect and be accurate to the manga. In fact, when they deviate away from it too far, there's often backlash. Customer habits and expectations are different. And this brings me to my next point as to why I think the
Japanese Eric. Konnichiwa, bitches.
are seeing their success. It's culture, but it's not just in one aspect. Let's first talk about the creator culture, and I know this is going to rub some people the wrong way. The American comic book creator culture is filled with egos and entitlement. It's less about the characters and their stories and more about them and their imprint, as I alluded to earlier. They care more about praise and worship than they do their universes. It's one of the lousiest industries when it comes to being in.
It's too bad he didn't delineate between indie comic creators and mainstream here. Maybe it's intended to just be focusing on the mainstream, but I think it would have been wise to just say mainstream creators, right, at DC Marvel currently. Because, yeah, of course, some of them, they are injecting their own political ideology. They want to push a message and all that. I mean, this is common sense at that point, but I sure hope he's not bundling indie creators into that. And you know what? This was a very good opportunity for him to plug indie creators. Like, hey, yeah, the mainstream is doing all of this, which is bad, but All these indie creators are not, which is why you should be supporting crowdfunding. There is a plethora of creators that are not pushing political ideology, they're not pushing wokeness, they're focused on quality and all of that. So this is why more folks should be supporting crowdfunding and indie creators. That's a missed opportunity in my opinion right there. And that again would get him even more support from indie creators and indie backers. But I guess that wouldn't be as marketable as as he believes for this video. He's got to have these very boilerplate like HR video clips here that have absolutely no relevancy to comics or to his audience, right? Why not just talk in front of a camera and have like comic book related stuff behind you? Actually make it have a comic feel, but no, you got to inject these really silly clips and stock photos in it. It's so corporate. Um, that is not. I don't feel the passion for comics. I feel the passion for business, right? For building an empire, for corporatism. We don't need more corporatism in mainstream comics or indie comics. We need more passion. We need more love for the characters, more love for quality, plain and simple. Not this nonsense.
Inviting of new talent. Many are in this Mexican standoff, or they're waiting to stab each other in the back just to advance their own careers. Anybody that gains momentum will be met with an onslaught of hatred. I speak from experience.
That to me felt like jabs at indie creators, not so much focusing on mainstream there, because of course he brought himself into it, acting as if he got stabbed in the back by indie creators, in my opinion, when we know there have been night letters, etc. Um, hmm, you know, we gotta let's catch in with the agitation in the chat here. It's not your job to read between the lines, not make assumptions on Eric and broadcast on truth. Dude, slow down when you type. Come on. Yeah, it's not my job. It's just something I want to do. It's free speech and all that. And again, I care about the indie space. So yeah, I want to speak out on these topics. Yep. Very SJW of him. Pulling the race card. Well, that means I need to call you out as I feel you are bad for comics. Okay, go for it. We'll see if my comics are bad for the industry or not. Douche nozzle. Nice. Oh, that's aggressive. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Niobe, I know what you look like, dude. I'm not gonna be intimidated by you, obviously. Jeez. Uh, but hey, I think that's something that you and Eric have in common, right? The tough talk. And puff out that chest, I guess. Uh, mhm. CG is a. I'm just gonna read the typos. Let's just have a laugh. CG is a garbage movement. Fall, loft, losers who cannot make it in the real industry. Well, if you want to be a writer in the mainstream, you're probably gonna have to work on your grammar. I mean, definitely. You're gonna drive the editors crazy there. Man, a garbage movement. You are the black sheep of comics that no one wants. Okay, okay. No. Okay. This right here is is nonsense. You don't purposely spend money on an industry to keep it alive. No, you spend money on things that are good. Sometimes these companies need to suffer in regards to their bottom line in order to them to realize they got to change the tide. They got to change the way that they're operating in order to stay alive, to make a profit. And we're seeing that now and again in film where every once in a while we get a phenomenal film, right? Free of politics, free of all this nonsense, and it makes a killing in the box office, like Oppenheimer, right? Just a truly creative film. We need to prop up those films, get more people to spend money on them, to send them a message of this is what we want, this is what we don't want. We shouldn't just be donating money to them so that they stay afloat. No. Otherwise, they're never going to change. They're going to continue down the same path if you just keep tossing, you know, charity at them. That's ridiculous. Okay. Okay. I'm not testing you. It seems like you're constantly trying to test me and my audience, and we're just getting a good laugh out of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's normal in any long running series that's going to get rebooted to an extent. What's going on, Andrew? Welcome. Stronger than you, Eric. You are fat, 300 pounds, beard and glasses. Are you sure about that? That's quite the assumption there. Uh, yeah, he does that quite frequently, right? Saying that American comic writers have egos, or that they like to do self inserts, make characters that are just like them. It's like, did you not read your own book, Isam? Had some glaring similarities to yourself. It's, no, real men do not fight over internet drama. Real men have families and are good to people. Yes, go back Death Raider on Fun My Comic. BA, your moral code in comics does not matter. Okay. Yeah, yeah. After he got called out for several years for not promoting indies, he basically threw a bone to a handful of indies, which I think were conveniently selected. And again, that's an optics thing. Every once in a while, he'll do an optics um, push just to be like, oh yeah, see, I'm proving all my critics wrong. I actually do this. I do that. I mean, come on. I shouldn't be getting attacked and criticized.
Many think their way is the way, and anybody that does it differently is a threat. A lot of it stems from economic illiteracy, where
Economic illiteracy. That's he's used that word at least 1,000 times. Um, he's trying to appear as if he knows economics, right? As if he's a specialist in economics. And most of the stuff he talks about is just common sense. And I get a laugh out of everything that he does because he makes the classic mistake, which sadly those that follow him do not, they're too gullible to realize what he's doing is that he tells, he doesn't show, which is a huge mistake in writing. You got to make sure that you show, that you're not just telling. And he's constantly just telling folks how it should be, but he's not actually showing. Like, where are the tutorials? Where is, a hour-long video showing people how to do a cost breakdown, right? How to manage print run sizes, um, how to be aware of hidden costs in indie comics, right? There's so many things that he could actually help folks on, But I don't understand why that's not happening, right? Because it's not great marketing material. It's probably not going to bring dollars to his company. But criticizing other creators and how they do things sure does seem to get attention, unfortunately. And then I'm sure he's about to bring up the whole fixed pie thing, which nobody in indie comics has ever said it's a fixed pie at all. The biggest struggle for indie creators is the lack of reach. There is a struggle to break out without, outside of your following. And that's because the big accounts, the big, conservative content creators, the big media outlets are not doing anything to push indies. They just want to spend their time complaining about the mainstream, getting those rage bait views. They don't actually want to offer up a solution or an alternative. They're not focused on that at all. That's the struggle of indies is getting seen, getting noticed, getting the word out about your book. It's not that the pie is surrounded by a 20-foot fence with barbed wire. No, it's just it's got a wall that's made of brick that you got to chip away at, and it takes a lot of chipping and time to break out and try to get the attention of others. It's not that
where
complicated.
people look at the market like a fixed pie, as if someone else's success attributes to their own failure. It's
Why? Why the stock images and stock videos of a guy making it rain in a business suit? Yeah, that's very, very comics, right? That's totally going to speak to comic book readers and comic book creators. Like this, ah, it feels like an orientation video at a new job, but 10 times more nauseating. It's just
else's success attributes to their own failure. It's a very catty industry.
he had to use not just use the word caddy, he had to put in a video of two cats fighting. Jeez.
They make this far more difficult than what it needs to be. Then turn around and
What? His videos truly are unbearable.
pretend like this is just how it is. This is how it is. It's tough out there. No, you're just being an ass and overcompensating and treating this like it's the cool kids club. I don't
Let's go back and re-listen to that.
make this far more difficult than what it needs to be. Then turn around and pretend like this is just how it is. This is how it is. It's tough out there. No, you're just being an ass and overcompensating and treating this like it's the cool kids club. I don't.
Who is he referring to when he says that you're being an ass? Again, is he talking about mainstream creators? Is he talking about indies? Is he just talking about creators in general? Because if it is creators in general, damn, shots fired, right? Like this makes it look like everyone's in the same boat and he's painting a broad brush. And to me, this could make indie creators look bad to his audience, right? As if indie creators have the same mentality, as if we play victim. Now, some people do play the victim card, and I do believe Eric does quite frequently. But he's trying to make it seem like it's everybody else that's like this, but not him. Like he does it right. He's a true, uh, businessman and entrepreneur. Like,
Don't doubt that Japanese folk have their share of the same. It's just not as prominent. And I think that's why a lot of the aspiring new artists are more manga inspired in their art styles. Countless amount of people have unfortunately seen what I've had to endure, for example, and
see, right there is the victimhood right there.
their art styles. Countless amount of people have unfortunately seen what I've had to endure, for example, and they've been turned away from being creators. They've reached out.
Okay. Eric being criticized has prevented you from being a creator. That's just sad. If you are actually passionate about your property and what you are doing, you wouldn't let anything stop you, let alone some big YouTuber being criticized. I would love to actually see some real examples of creators that have said, "Oh, well, I'm just not going to enter the indie space. I'm going to call it quits because I've seen how you've been treated. I don't want to risk that." Thing is, most of these people probably have no following. If they were to drop an indie project, no one's going to bat an eye because no one knows who they are, so they're not going to get criticized. And most indies do not get criticized unless they put their foot in their mouth or they make promises, come in with a huge ego and say, "Hey, I'm going to make something better than the mainstream. I'm going to dance on the graves of past comic creators and all this nonsense." Then, yeah, you'll get criticized and rightfully so. But right here, right, he's making it seem like, oh, he's being attacked. He's a victim. So sad. I mean, just so sad.
Out to me and explicitly told me that. This means less innovation, which is what this industry really needs. But
Okay, less innovation. Yeah, there's minimal innovation, in my opinion, when it comes to the Rippaverse, right? I think he should take his own advice there and focus on innovation. And with innovation should come quality. Otherwise, what you create is not going to get far. But again, right here's a great opportunity to plug crowdfunding. Hey, all these indie creators, they are being innovators. They're coming up with new property. They're doing things the right way, the way that things used to be done back in the 90s and 80s. Go check out some campaigns on all these websites. But nope, it's gonna make it about him and then continue on with criticizing how others are doing things.
enough about that. Let's get into some solutions. I did a video titled The Economic Illiteracy of the Comic Book Business. Please go watch.
Economic illiteracy. I do think that one of these nights, I mean, obviously when I'm not sick, maybe we should have a couple other people on the panel. We need to have a drinking game where we watch one of his videos and then we have a small glossary of some of his buzzwords, right? Economic illiteracy, archaic. Uh, every time he says it, you have to take a shot, and we'll see how far people can last. It'd be very difficult.
It. It's an essay where I break down the economics of the American industry and how it always was on thin ice. One of the benefits of having
So amazing gaming production says, "Who wants to be part of the mainstream?" You know, that's a complicated question. I mean, I think everybody that's a creator would love to be in the mainstream if it was the mainstream from 20 years ago, if they could change course. You know, I think the best possible thing, right, it would be if your property could be turned into a Netflix show or Netflix film or a film in general. There is, I think, a possibility for indie creators, even if they're controversial, to have their property picked up in film or TV or something because some studios and directors and writers there are truly focused on the properties and focused on quality. The problem with the big two is, yeah, you let's say you get picked up. Well, within a couple months, all it takes is some SJWs writing emails or calling these companies with some hyperbole and nonsense and lies, and boom, you're out. And what's the point? Um, then again, that actually could help you in the long run, right? Because that's a great real life example of like, hey, I got canceled. I got pushed out of the mainstream for whatever reasons, whatever beliefs, and it would help you get a spotlight in the indie scene. So it could be positive long term. But then again, you're gonna have to deal with your name being dragged through the mud and a bunch of nonsense online, and your name being smeared on a larger scale, right? Not just within the indie community, for example. So, yeah, I mean, of course, if they could change course, it would be phenomenal to be published in heavier books, under the same, company as Frank Miller and Moore and all of them. But it just wouldn't feel as monumental as it would have 20, 30 years ago. And you'd almost be walking on eggshells, sitting at the edge of your seat, just waiting to to be canceled or removed from the company. So it would take all that excitement and it'd just be killed, unfortunately. So yeah. Right. Niobe says, "You are bad personally. Your thought process, your attitude. You opt troll on Eric to sell a book, as you know it will not sell on its own merit." Actually, my book did sell on its own merit. I never marketed my book as being an alternative to the Rippaverse or being an alternative to the mainstream. I pitched it as a property that I'm just passionate about, characters that I love, about making a traditional story about heroism and vigilantism. That's it. And this is an ironic post or statement here because Eric has, in my opinion, op trolled the mainstream, right? He built his following from criticizing films, from criticizing the big two, just like FNT and all of them. And then he used that as his launch pad to then do his Rippaverse. If it weren't for all that criticizing and trolling of the mainstream, he wouldn't be where he's at now. So I don't know why you're defending him and then criticizing me of what you're criticizing me of. Slow down then. Pretty simple. And don't fucking read them, man. I have so little respect for all of you to be bothered to waste more than 4 seconds for a spell check. So why are you here hate watching if you have such little respect for us? Like you're not actually providing anything of value here. You're not countering anything with any substance. I mean, like your previous comment up there, like provide how my thought process is nonsense. Like give examples of where I'm wrong.
Having the big two as they were was that it almost acted as a welfare state for many creators. They're the only ones that could operate like that, and they weren't as profitable as you think. I bring this up to say there needs to be some sort of economic revolution if people are going to thrive. Trying to copy the traditional comic book distribution and pricing model.
And of course, he's going to go into distribution and he's going to focus more on the business side of things and economic literacy when we know distribution was not the issue 20, 30 years ago. Again, it's about quality. That's it. It's about the big two not wanting to pay as much as they used to retain high quality artists and to actually take their time focusing on releasing major projects versus pushing quantity. It's like he can never focus in a video to actually criticize them properly and say, hey, it's the quality that's the issue. Yes, there's political agendas, there's ideology, common sense. Everybody knows that. You can make a video a million times about it. Everybody gets it. The problem is the quality. Show the quality of art on some of the modern books now compared to books 20, 30 years ago. Give examples and show that it's a quality issue. But for some reason, he doesn't harp on the quality. He can't just say it's the fact that they don't care or respect the characters. They don't care about the quality of the art as much. That's why they're not making as much money. It's because they're not selling as much. That's it.
model is silly for two reasons. One, it never actually worked as far as profitability. And two, when it was added,
Pretty sure they were profitable back in the 80s and 90s and before then. I mean, I'd have to look up the numbers, but I highly doubt that they were struggling back then when they were actually focused on quality.
its best, that was a different technological time. This is why I think it's silly when people think just trying to get their comics on a classic newsstand is going to save the industry like it's the 80s or something. People don't consume, nor do they discover the same way they did in previous decades, especially younger people. The internet is now the newsstand, and all creators, especially in
Man, that was kind of a shot at Niobe, right? Because Niobe's all about just you got to get in comic shops, right? You got to get on those shelves. That's when you've made it, right? That's when you're mainstream. That's how you're gonna get known. You just said the opposite. That's not how people are getting found these days. Man, you should be offended by that, I think, Niobe. You are not a good person. BS of you to have to treat. Can't even read this. Criticism is not cancellation. And again, if he didn't make controversial statements, and in my opinion, make statements that are filled with misinformation and nonsense, then I wouldn't have anything to criticize.
independence will need to adjust and get out of that archaic line of thinking. Now, I believe that the American comic book industry will be saved by the independents. You're going to see different models, and there will never be a universal setup anymore. What works for us will not.
Okay, if it's going to be saved by the independents, why are you not promoting more independents? Why are you not pushing crowdfunding as a model? You have a huge following. You could do so much good for independent creators. You could get so many more eyes on the indies that could actually help save the industry. Why are you not spending more time on that versus just continuing to harp on the existing models, on the mainstream, and make these just cringe ass videos with a bunch of stock, photos and videos? Why not focus on trying to help save the industry, right? If that's what you're actually passionate about, get more eyes on indie projects, help lift up everybody in the space so that you can get more attention towards indies versus the mainstream. Constantly talking about the mainstream is not going to help indies.
Not work for others and vice versa. Welcome the innovation and understand that you need to always learn. Most importantly, understand that innovation is not a negative thing. It may scare you and make a lot of what you learned obsolete, but don't treat it like it's an attack. This will welcome people to not a negative thing. It may
Hold on.
that the American comic book industry will be saved by the independents. You're going to see different models, and there will never be a universal setup anymore. What works for us will not work for others and vice versa. Welcome the innovation and understand that you need to always learn. Most importantly, understand that innovation is not a negative thing. It may scare you and make a lot of what you learned obsolete, but don't.
Innovation might make a lot of what you learned obsolete. I don't agree with that. Um, most of us read legacy comics and learn from the best of the best. If it weren't for previous, literary creations, there wouldn't be innovation. You actually have to learn from others. If you have this mindset that approaches and models from the past are obsolete, and you need to just approach it like completely new, ooh, that's gonna be tough. I mean, that's how you could possibly create horrible comics, right? By not actually learning from creators that have done it properly. Um, mm,
Don't treat it like it's an attack. This will welcome people to not only create, but to also get involved as customers. You need to understand that most readers aren't your fellow creators. This is a hurdle that a lot of people can't get over, especially when they underperform. You've got to be a capitalist. Unless you're a teacher, your peers are never going to be your primary audience.
What is with these videos? Come on, videos of kids in a classroom. Are you serious? Come on, that's just weird.
They also aren't trained to view things through a market lens. You will be broke in no time if you're only trying to serve yourself and your peers, and you think that the audience must live up to your standards as if your art is God's blessing to them. And you
Come on, who are you talking about there? What creators are acting like their art is like God's blessing? I think we know the answer to that, who he's referring to.
must learn that even if you are the guy, you're not always going to be the guy. Stop trying to control people's taste, as it only makes you come off as an elitist.
Elitist. No one is trying to control anyone's taste. No one is trying to gatekeep. Oh my gosh. There's so much nonsensical bullshit in these videos. Criticizing low quality works does not make you an elitist. If that's the case, then Eric is an elitist because he's constantly criticizing the business model of the big two, right? He just criticized distribution. So then he is an elitist by essentially showing or telling folks like, hey, they're doing things wrong. But hey, these people and we're doing it right. So how is what he does any different from folks in the indie space saying like, hey, these indie comics over here are of low quality. I mean, look at the 3D assets. Look at all these lack of details. It's simple criticism and critique. That's it. That does not make someone an elitist. If it does, then a lot of his peers are also elitists by how they nitpick and try to tear apart every new Disney, Marvel, and DC film.
This should humble you and have you think less about tradition and going through the motions and more about fulfilling the demand of the customers. And as for the customers, I think everybody is going to have to realize, as many of you already have, the mainstream isn't the only gig in town. Gaming is also going through this fundamental change. It used to be that people only really bought what was put in their face. So the bigger companies felt like the only ones that existed. But now people are giving indies more of a chance, and the discovery is better due to
Okay, bringing up indies again. Why not plug where they're at? Give some examples of some indies. Nope.
the internet. Similar things, I think, are going to happen in comic book restructuring. This may mean that there's never another big two, but that's okay. We also must be fair to these publishers and understand that success is not simply measured in the form of this major box office or making millions of dollars. As time progresses, the more people become accustomed to free content. But smaller independent companies can't sustain nor grow without you purchasing the things that you find of value. There are really no loss leaders as an independent. Only big, massive companies can afford to do that. So as you're hearing, it's about making this far more welcoming to both creators and customers. It isn't just a wokeness issue. Yeah, the push for DEI stifles creativity, but wokeness just amplified the problem and was easily identifiable. You had a bunch of identitarians and social political motivated people trying to ham fist their agenda, and customers didn't want it for various reasons. Opposing politics, bastardization.
And all of that goes into the lack of care for quality, right? If you are actually give a shit about the story and about the characters, politics is unneeded. Ideologies are unneeded. I mean, you can insert it tastefully, don't get me wrong, but when it's in your face and shoved down your throat, that's when it becomes a problem. But again, if they actually cared about these legacy characters and they respected them, none of this would happen. So, yes, it's popular to focus on the political aspect of it an ideology because it helps get the rage views, but the stem of it is that they don't care about the quality. They don't respect the actual characters and the creators that brought them to life.
You know, favorite characters, etc. And many creators walked on eggshells in hopes that they weren't the next to be canceled. This is a hostile environment.
Can you believe that Niobe is trying to gatekeep me? Saying that if I don't make $2 million on a comic, I shouldn't have an opinion. Oh, trying to take away my free speech up there in Canada, Niobe. Come on. No, I can guarantee you he cannot do it better than me. I can guarantee you that my first comic issue is going to be of higher quality than ISOM 1, ISOM 2. I can guarantee it. And it doesn't take a lot to do that. There are a lot of indie creators, especially in CG, that have already done it better. I am confident that my Vigilantes Creed novels, the stories in them, the characters, are of higher quality than ISOM 1 and 2 and the other properties. Can't believe you're gatekeeping me. It's funny that he, of course, brings up a JDA article. Birds of a feather flock together. Okay. What does that have to do with quality? See, it's all about dollar amount, sub count, when all I give a shit about is making the best book possible. And that's the case for a lot of indies. And yes, sacrificing time to focus on your book versus making rage bait videos and shit like this. Yeah, it means less clout, less followers, less eyes on your project. But most of us have to have a 9 to 5. Most of us have kids. Things like that that prevent us from doing stuff and videos like this every day.
And it's impossible for great ideas to flourish during these conditions. It's not fun, and it's certainly not escapism. And Doug.
You'll be back. Emus can't help people custom.
There are a lot of people doing some awesome things, but obviously we've got a long way to go if the American market is to thrive. I think that this can all be improved upon. I'm not a doomer when it comes to this industry. I'm actually an optimist. Seeing what Iconic Comics are doing with their various series like Common America and Soul Finder is inspiring. They have a big Japanese presence as well.
And so I think that the buddying up to Iconic, it makes sense now, more so. If he had an inkling that he was going to jump into the manga space or try to market a manga, of course, he wants to court the Iconic audience. So definitely makes sense that he's been, trying to get as close to them as possible, because he wants access to their audience, especially now that he's going to be pushing a manga. So, yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence either.
And they work incredibly hard. They understand professionalism is just as important as the quality in what they create.
Oh, Niobe, do I have to pull up your previous campaigns? We've went over this before. It took you, what, maybe 4 or 5 campaigns to break 14,000 on a single campaign. Your first couple campaigns only did, what, 4,000, 7,000, something of that nature, right? And that was back when crowdfunding was more of a golden goose. It was much easier, 4, 5, 6 years ago to have higher funded campaigns. There was less saturation in the indie market as well. So I am about $100 away from 14,000 across both platforms on my campaign. In my first campaign. So I am way ahead of where you started. I actually did more in my first campaign than you did combined in your first couple campaigns. So, like I continue to say, we'll see how my first comic issue fares against your highest funded campaign, which Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's 30,000 or 25,000. So we'll see. If my first comic outfunds your highest campaign, well, I think that'll settle that.
There's no substitute for work, and you can't
That
just
chart's
as
kind of
important
ironic.
as the quality in what they create. There's no substitute for work. And
Hmm. So if we were to look at the trajectory or the trends of his campaigns, well, yeah,
you
you know
can't
what I'm
just
saying.
skate on by with past accomplishments. Everybody is updating their resume, and you have to work just as hard to deliver as you do on creating. Not everything will work, and not everything will become some monumental success, but we need more folks out there giving it a shot. Even if you aren't directly connected with someone that gets, let's say, new fans enthusiastic about comics, you can benefit from it whether you know it or not, because it places more eyes on the actual industry. Don't be irritated or sour or feel that you are more deserving, and don't try to kneecap anybody because they haven't gone through some arbitrary struggle that you feel they must endure to become legitimate. Being encouraging.
Well, saying that 99% of crowdfunding creators don't have a business bone in their body definitely isn't helping anything either.
Is what this industry needs. The positivity in it is infectious to both creators and customers. The new era of American comics is going to look a lot different. The market is adjusting, and just because you had a spot in the old system does not mean that you are guaranteed a spot in the future. There were a lot of smoke and mirrors, and people have seen the bubble burst. Others think it's over, but I tend to think that it's just time for a new age. I've said a million times, even if the Rippaverse wasn't as successful, I have no problem with a more decentralized industry. It's still a necessary adjustment.
Oof. Yeah, that was as rough as I expected. Um, but again, it's in line with a lot of his past commentary and all that is just, hey, criticize the big two, criticize the traditional methods and all that, and try to make it appear as if right Rippaverse is doing it better. But I don't think a lot of the Rippaverse comics are doing anything better than modern mainstream comics, which yikes, right? Um, but he has all the resources, connections, um, and clout to make a comic better than anything that the mainstream is putting out currently. But it's not happening. So I don't know if it's a lack of passion for the craft or is it just again pushing that quantity narrative and having it all be about business metrics. Guess we'll see in the next year or two how that works out for him. Yeah, so what that you've been in Diamond 10 times. How's Diamond doing? Chat is having fun with Larry. Oh man. So Niobe, didn't you do plenty of videos of Eric in the past criticizing him? So are you just like repenting now and your sins have been forgiven now that you're licking his boots? Hmm, funny. Yeah, have fun in Germany. uh, Eric clearly does it better than all of you, and here you sit thinking all of you know better. If you did, you'd be millionaires. No. Many of us are doing higher quality stories, creating higher quality characters. But in today's age with the internet, and again, talking about reach, it's about who you are and who you know more so than what you're creating in a lot of cases. That's why a lot of the folks that came from the mainstream, had a pre-existing audience as a result of their high quality art or stories, right, coming from the mainstream, had a great launch pad in indie comics and in crowdfunding, and that's why they've been very successful. But they earned it by creating quality books versus some YouTubers, right, that basically got their following and their launch pad as a result of just doing commentary and criticizing those that are millionaires, right? Whether it's the actors or the companies. So why isn't he making more money than them? Hmm? Why isn't he making better books than the mainstream? Why isn't he outselling all of their books? Again, most of us, it's not about clout, it's not about metrics, it's about the content of our stories and of our books, which does a full circle back to the issue with the mainstream. It's a lack of care for quality. We need more indies that give a shit about quality. And that's the only way we're going to get more eyes on crowdfunding because folks like Eric, folks like Conning, and all of them are not doing jack shit to get eyes on other indie creators. They only want to highlight folks that they can benefit from or that they want to hire. And that's a huge issue in the indie space. All they do is talk the talk. They don't actually back up what they claim to believe in most cases. Yeah, I know. We would all struggle with that drinking game for sure. And welcome, Primal Gecko. Gecko, thanks for being here. I don't know. Herberg just got or Narwhal. He got recognized by Millar or Miller, right? When he was in Comicsgate. He has a lot of Netflix stuff going on, so who knows? It could happen. Right. So there's one other one that I wanted to pull up here, and this is one from maybe a month ago. It's a much shorter video, but it's an Eric video about why nerd culture is dying. The real problem with comics and entertainment. So seemed like a relative video. Let's check this one out. See what's going on with that. I'm sure it's going to be filled with great stock images and videos. All right.
The American comic book industry and just Western entertainment in general has seen better days. You probably watched some of my old videos where I talked about how the core thing that's missing right now in nerd culture pertaining to Western media is fan enthusiasm. Though not exclusively, this especially applies.
And yes, the lack of fan enthusiasm is why a lack of care for quality.
To newer, recently released content. I think it's very important to understand why this isn't the case anymore and why it's so important that it returns. Once upon a time, this was a standard in nerd culture. Even if it was dealing with a story or character that you weren't a fan of, it was still all in fun and the focus was on the characters and their world. Nowadays, the focus is a lot.
None of us can cancel Eric, nor are any of us trying to. Criticism does not equate to cancellation. Come on. No, what's lame is how you speak.
More on who made the characters and what they do in their spare time. And there are contributing factors to this. One, the explosion of social media. Everybody has many computers in their pockets and conversations are a lot more widespread. It's impossible to replicate the anticipation of the old days before everything was so connected. Now these conversations are not had in just these contained nerd spaces. They're all over the internet. Two, which lies into one, is how mainstream some of the nerd culture stuff became. It's the best thing to happen, but in the long term, there are some consequences. It's not to say that people didn't know about superheroes and sci-fi back in the gap. It's that a lot of things have been pushed to the forefront. So this means a lot of non-nerds have placed themselves into these spaces. They brought in those habits and that has completely disrupted the subculture. Now everybody is chasing wide appeal, and that has impacted how the more niche things like comics are created. So many went into this trying to chase a Hollywood deal. And third, which you knew I was going here, is the inevitable culture wars. In the mid 2010s, there was this obvious focus on box checking, which led to this pattern recognition. Orange Man becomes president, and now everybody loses their minds. Now these creators are pledging allegiance to social causes. They lost their mystique, and unfortunately, it began to impact their work. So people justifiably began to highlight the individual creators a lot more and their antics. And that's because it was bleeding into the things that they were fans of. There was a lot of denial and a lot of fan.
And that's again, that's a result of the management at Marvel and DC not caring about quality, not focusing on the legacy characters and respecting the characters. They wanted to push political ideologies and their own, beliefs, right? Push their own message. But it all stems back to they're not respecting the characters and they're not focused on quality.
Attacking. Though some people would like to pretend otherwise, most of my content consisted of reviews in the worlds of comics. Even most of the movie reviews I did were positive and
Provide examples of where I'm making statements full of information. Larry, entertain me, please.
mostly contained to those characters. I would explain why this made sense or why it didn't make sense, the history. But now the general online conversation is about the writer, the artist, or the actor and what they did and why. And I'm not oblivious to that. But if American culture is going to improve, it needs its fans and customers nerding out.
Hello there.
This was something I recognized before I even started my own comic book company. This is way bigger than just me, and we need people engaged enough to talk about the world and its characters. It's less about fans needing to do it and more about this being an indicator on the health of the industry.
I mean, if that were true, wouldn't you had put more focus on making unique characters that create intrigue? A lot of them, in my opinion, were very generic and boilerplate, and they seem almost too inspired by existing, comic book characters. It's not going to help the industry by just creating more genericy, which is in line with modern comics, unfortunately.
So much talk about the talent or lack thereof of the people creating. Though this may bruise some egos here, the truth is that most fans are not aspiring creators. So how talented or untalented someone is should not dominate the conversation among actual fans of that world. Same goes for their social views or political views. Sure, those conversations are expected to exist in the creator spaces on the fringe. And you want to be personable, but nerd culture is at its best when creators are ambassadors for the characters and their stories. It should be perfectly normal that there exist these super fans that are largely unfamiliar with the creator.
Larry. The numbers do not having high sales numbers or high funding numbers does not equate to high quality. This is common sense. Captain Marvel, in terms of films, is a perfect example, right? Very low quality film, made a shit ton of money, but that doesn't mean it's high quality. And if that's the case, Larry, then based on your logic, right? If it's all about sales numbers, then my first books are better than your first like four because I outfunded your first four or five, however many. So, I mean, you kind of kneecapped yourself right there. And no, quality matters. Numbers are a bonus. Numbers can help you continue to create, right? They allow growth. But many of us would rather have a fantastic book and make reasonable numbers than push out garbage and have high numbers. It's called integrity.
Not too long ago, there was a stream about Marvel's Punisher and the Rippa versus the Horsemen on John's Longbox's channel.
To drive the point, I must emphasize that he's explicitly stated that he's not a fan of ISOM, despite me being on his channel as a guest. But he hosted a fun stream where others got to come on and nerd out about the two characters. This is what it's about, fans having some good fun and nerding out. Back in the Gap, you would have even these heated discussions and debates, but it was all just passion.
Ooh, a agitator team up, Larry and Mike. There's nothing for me to learn from you guys. I'm sorry. I don't want to make faux Japanese books about feminism, and I don't want to make freaking parody books filled with nudity and smut. So, what am I going to learn from you guys? And I'm already more comfortable and confident in the art that I've already commissioned, that's already been attached to my project, past and present. So, yeah, no thanks.
Passionate fun. Once these types of conversations are happening far more often and they are far more widespread, that will be the indicator that the property or industry altogether is healthy. I want to be clear.
What? I am sure we were all raised, if you have nothing nice to say nothing at all. Well, you better shush up then, Larry, because you just can't seem to stop talking. And none of it's nice.
I'm not suggesting that people ignore who the creators are, especially after they have weaponized their personal views and bastardized characters because they were incapable of leaving it at the door. I'm saying that a lot of the tone is going to be set by the creators and the owners of those properties. We're going to have to remember that this is about the fans and it's not just art.
How indie of you. You have to watch what you say on your streams because you're afraid of being canceled by conventions. Well, they're not good conventions if they have issues with free speech, but um uh all it would take is for conventions to take a look at any of the streams that you troll to see how nasty you can be, right? But it's a good thing that CG is not into cancel culture, right? They would never do anything nasty like others have done to people in CG. But
For art's sake. It's not about massaging the egos of creators or ensuring that they are worshipped by the fans. It's not about celebrity cabals or cliques. And it's especially not about gimmicks. As they say, leave the drama to the pages because this game needs enthusiasm. The fans will give creators their flowers, but only after they've been provided with something worthwhile. Here at the Rippaverse, we're constantly trying to improve the fan.
well, it doesn't seem like people are speaking with their wallets when it comes to your projects lately. So maybe you should put some more focus towards those and how you're going to get more eyes on your projects. Maybe you got to watch more Eric videos, right? I mean, if he's so good at showing people how to be more successful versus telling, then you should have no problems, right? Your current campaign should be at a lot higher numbers than it really is right now.
Experience, which will encourage them to nerd out. People have their day jobs and their real lives. The least that we can do is give them a fun sandbox where they're able to come together
Sandbox.
and just have some fun.
One of those words we'd have to use for the drinking game.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to head over to rippaverse.com to check out our comic book company. We have books, plenty of merchandise, and even some glorious animations from Rippaverse Studio.
But see, if numbers matter, there's a good chance that Niobe's stream or your stream would have a lower view count than mine and lower watch hours. So it would mean that it's lower quality. Oh shit. Shit. Your narrative is turning on you. So hard to keep up with the chat. It's great. Oh jeez. You a teenage girl. Yeah, conventions mean more to me. My local appearances mean more to me than any of your politics or social views. We're not even talking about politics, really. I don't push politics in my books, so. CG is not cancel culture. Correct. It is not. That is all that it is. What are you doing right now is a cancel attempt. No. Criticism is not cancellation. But cancel culture is nothing new to CG since many in CG have been canceled in many different aspects of it. Talking about politics. Jeez. Uh, Thought provoking books. Yeah, I think books talking about abortion are not going to help the industry or help the mainstream by any means. Why can't you just have a book about heroics? I mean, why bring in politics like that? I don't know. What's going on, Sky Abyss? Welcome. That is exactly what you are doing. You are telling Eric what is wrong when he is better than you, makes more money than anyone here in the chat. None of us give a shit about the money he is making. We're criticizing the quality of his books and his messaging, his narratives. It impacts the indie space. It works because he has reach. If he was like, and this is common sense, if he would have started out as a unknown indie creator with 1,000 followers, 500 YouTube subscribers, Isom probably wouldn't have raised more than $5,000, if that. His success is tied to his previous endeavors, which built his audience, which built his sub count. That is what got him the sales that he got. That's it. It's a result of his music endeavors, his political commentary, and then his critique of film, comics, etc. Well, you're going to have to spend 15 years doing political commentary and making music and all of that if you want to grow based off of his suggestions. Because again, I don't see him showing folks how to improve their art, how to improve their storytelling, how to actually learn business, showing real examples. It's all telling. That's it. Uh, I'm talking about being in CG is about political and social culture views. CG has CG spews garbage I hate. By being in it, I get canceled. Well, you were never in it. So CG never got you canceled. I will not get canceled to a PC. So I'm not in CG because of political views or social culture views. Yes, a lot of creators in CG tend to be more on the conservative side or independent side. So that does line up nicely with my political views and beliefs. I'm an independent, um, but that's not why I'm connected to CG. I'm in CG because they're about promoting others. They were very inviting. And because I stumbled upon artists in CG that were willing to work with me and were willing to give me advice that helped me. They actually showed me, they gave me real examples like, hey, here's the range of what you could expect for page rates, for line art, for coloring, and all of that. Here's what you can expect going through a crowdfunding campaign. People actually took the time, even though it wouldn't benefit them. right? They took the time to help me, to teach me. They promoted me. They didn't have to promote me. I was not giving them any clout or more views, right? They did it because they care about the space. They care about crowdfunding. That's what brought me into CG. That's what made it appealing. And then just the collaborative nature of it and the promotional aspect. You can't find that really in other areas of indie comics, really. There aren't many folks providing platforms for promotion. Everybody is kind of on their own in the rest of the indie space. And if you don't have a YouTube following, a Twitter following, you're going to struggle to get funding. CG is willing to help one another. That is the most attractive aspect of it. It's not about the political or social culture views. It's a nice bonus when that does line up, but there's a lot of, political views and social culture views, I guess, across a lot of CG creators that doesn't necessarily line up with mine. But that's not what this is about to me. It's about comics, it's about storytelling, and it's about growth. And I want other creators to grow alongside of me. It's not all about me. I just don't have that approach. I'm not a corporatist, or anything like that. So aggressive. Oh, now we have a trio of agitators. Okay, what comics in CG are crap then? I'd like to hear some examples. And then I'd like to have you show some pages of said books up against yours. And then let the chat decide. But I do know a lot of CG books are significantly outfunding your book. So what does that say? It's about numbers. Yeah, there's no talks of abortion or anything like that in Vigilantes Creed. So I have to apologize to SJWs that that's not in my books. Not that I know of. I don't think many people actually ban folks in the chat unless they really cross a line. I mean, obviously, haven't done that. I just let them talk into the void and fight with the chat because the chat can definitely hold their own. So that is not jealousy. That is just fact. It's no different than a politician or an athlete releasing a book. It's naturally going to have high sales because a name can go a long way. I'm not discounting any of his work. I'll applaud him on the grind that he did in building that YouTube. Like the content, not my cup of tea, and I could criticize that in many regards, but it's not about being jealousy or being jealous. No, it's just stating a fact that that's what gave him that launch pad. It's not the actual characters in his book. It's not actually the quality of his book that got him all of those sales. It's the fact that he had reach. Well, he was saying that, indies are what's going to change the landscape, right? For the future of comics. So wouldn't you want to help other indies grow alongside of you? Um, why not help others so that indies as a whole can get more eyes and that more indies can hopefully get into the mainstream, change the landscape in the mainstream, or we could have a new image or a new company pop up that could really highlight those that are working hard and are actually creating great books. Right? That's what we need more of. More competition with the mainstream so that the mainstream will change their act and also just get more eyes on indie creators. And I mean, this isn't like any secret sauce or anything like that. We know, yes, he's good at marketing, and a lot of that is just due to his experience in YouTube. But if he's constantly acting as if he knows business, as if he's an expert in business, in creating comics, right? So show it, like prove it, and help other creators along the way. There's a lot of small indie creators that are doing that. I don't understand why he wouldn't do that as well. Well, that's a problem with the convention. It's as simple as just saying, no, I'm not. If they're not willing to believe you, they're a shitty convention. And why would you want to support them? Why would you want to give them your money to have a table at a convention, led by people that don't believe in free speech, that want to, prevent creators from making money? I wouldn't want to support that convention. Screw them. Call them out. Yep. Yep. Yeah, and another night we'll have to pull up the first Twitter interaction I had with Eric, and a lot of people believe that like I'm a detractor or hater or whatever nonsense, um, just because EBS is or whatever. Well, way before the falling out happened between EBS and him, I had a couple Twitter interactions where he was, you know, talking down to me essentially. In my opinion, was quite egotistical. And the initial conversation was just around like promotion. I was just saying like, hey man, I think it would be really good optics for you if you promoted other indie creators. You'd help them grow. They would expose their audience, their following to Rippaverse books, right? It's mutually beneficial. And it turned into this long-winded, you know, match of him just trying to defend that he doesn't have time and that I don't understand the amount of effort he has to put into, and because of his sales, like I could never be able to relate to him. But he's like neglecting the fact that some of us have high pressure jobs. We have families. We have a lot of other responsibilities in life that we could easily say, well, like, hey, you can't relate to that. But hey, we're still able to create great books and promote folks. Like it's not that difficult. Uh, and that whole incident, ironically, right? This comment's great because the whole incident with Immortal Rising, right? The backhanded donation that Eric had given him was a result of me having a back and forth with one of his followers where I said, like, yeah, it was his previous following, right? The pre-cultivated audience that he had that set up his success. That's why he got those huge numbers. That's why he was able to get on Fox News, right? That's why he had the reach. That is, in my opinion, probably 95% of those sales. It wasn't me criticizing him. It was just stating an opinion that is basically common sense. And then his follower tried to push hyperbole and he tagged Eric, of course. And then Eric did a quote tweet, which initiated a dog pile. And then Immortal Rising jumped in, just defending me, basically saying, like, hey, how did he say anything insulting? He was just saying that, hey, you had a pre existing audience and that led to your success. Like, what's wrong with that? And then he did the backhanded donation, which Immortal Rising refused, refunded it. Kudos to him. And then, they had their back and forth, and Eric was quite nasty and, was talking down to Immortal Rising. And then to improve his optics, he took that and essentially said, oh, well, now I'm going to donate $1,000 to like three other creators. And he tossed $1,000 on their campaigns. And I don't believe he even wanted their books, right? He just did a donation. It's like, why wouldn't you at least pick up their books? That's what would excite them the most is like, hey, we have this new publisher, right? New kid on the block with a huge following. Like, I want you to read my book because, maybe you would spread the word about it, but they didn't even want their books from what I can remember. And it's like, geez. But yeah, I don't see how that's controversial to just be like, hey, your sales are most likely a result of your pre cultivated audience. Just like when an athlete or a politician releases a book. Good chance it's going to sell well because you have a name. Not that complicated. Oh, what's going on, Katie? Did welcome. Thanks for being here. Apologize that my voice is kind of wonky again. This flu has been kicking my ass recently. We have One Gun here. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Oh boy, I came in here to talk chill with B.A. Turner, Vigilantes Creed, and Cat Food Larry. And you're bragging about his limited knowledge on nothingness. Yeah? All right. So Niobe says these groups, like my own, don't need names. I'm watching two other streams right now that are not CG. Okay, but I guarantee you their reach is very minimal compared to CG. And that's what's awesome about CG. It's not just about the fact that they are willing to promote one another. And we're talking guys that are like smaller, medium, large. On every level, they're promoting folks on every level. There's very few that are not promoting folks. And so it's like a double bonus there. And unfortunately, you just don't see a lot of large creators outside of CG promoting other indie comics, unfortunately. Yes, back in Glorious Rex for sure. ACG campaign that is over $300,000 in total funding. I think this is the second or third time they've done that. So, based on the logic of Larry and Mike and others in the chat, that means Shane is making higher quality books. He's doing better. So, let's pump up those numbers. Oh, yeah. I could ignore him. I could ignore right agitators in the chat, but for me, it's always relative to the topics at hand, and I think it's good to have such discussions. Um, because again, folks in the chat may not be aware of some of the stuff going on in the indie space, and it's always good to put agitators in their place and try to push some knowledgeable narratives versus some of the bullshit that's out there currently. No, it's about right-wing Trumpers being together because they were canceled. That's CG. Not everybody in CG are Trumpers. There's a lot of folks that support him, but they're not like overly like MAGA or whatever. There's a lot of us that are just like, yeah, we believe he was the best option out of the two. I have the approach to politics where I don't idolize politicians. I will criticize any politician, even Trump. There are certain stances that he has or beliefs that I don't agree with, and I will be public about that, just like I would any other politician. And so there's a lot of independent folks or folks that are not like idolizing politicians in CG. It is quite a diverse group of people, which is great. And you can be a Snyder bro or you can be an independent and still get promoted in CG, still get along with folks. I mean, Vito's a good example, right? He's not a Trumper. He's more of a classic liberal, and he's been welcomed into CG, even though he doesn't like label himself CG. But he's promoted me. He's promoted a lot of folks in the space, even though our political ideologies don't line up. That's what we need more of in comics, right? We need more folks that are willing to talk across the aisle, that are willing to focus on stories and focus on improving the industry versus focusing on just political beliefs, because that's what's been destroying the space. Let's see, I gotta find your response here. Apologize. Still getting used to getting so many folks in the chat and all of that. Uh, yeah, that's what I don't understand is like if you hate CG and you hate EVS, for example, like why are you constantly in his chat and in the chat of those that support him or associate with him? And this goes to the whole hate watching thing. Like, and yeah, I'm sure you would consider me a hypocrite, the agitators for watching an Eric video, right? But the only reason I'm doing that is so that we can actually have discussions around what's going on in the indie space and what's going on in comics. I do not watch his live streams. I do not go in there and chat in the live streams or any of that because I have better things to do. Just like if I know based off a trailer that a movie does not look good, I'm not going to go and watch it. Even if I could get views from it, grow my YouTube presence, and even get some comic sales or novel sales out of it, I won't do it because it's a waste of time. I refuse to spend my time watching things that I hate unless you can actually have good conversation around it that could actually help the space or spread like knowledge. But if it's just, I hate this and just constant nonsense critique, then there's no value in it. But it is funny how they're constantly in everyone's chat. It's like, why aren't you trying to build your audience? You're not obviously going to build your audience by talking to people that will never be in your audience. Like, I'm not going to go into a live stream, filled with SJWs or in Eric's live stream and gain backers or followers. Like, so why would I spend my time there? Never watched the show, so can't comment on that. Mhm. That's I don't know what it is with you and prison rape and all that. You constantly bring it up. I don't know if it's like a something you fantasize about, but it's very, very weird to be thinking about that. No, my agenda is not drama clicks. Trust me, if I really want to grow my channel, I could EFAP all of his videos. I could push hyperbole, but I don't do that. Um, I make commentary that's based off of my beliefs with a touch of sarcasm, but I only do it in these instances because I actually give a shit about the indie space and I want to counter um, narratives that I don't agree with and that I think are bad for the indie space. Maybe it can enlighten some of the folks that are parroting his narratives. Maybe it can bring folks to some CG projects in the meantime. But I'm doing it because I want to actually have discussion around the things that he's saying and get the feedback from the chat and the general viewer. I don't know anyone that's scared to have a discussion with you. So, so Eric says, Mindy Wheeler, that's not Ethan. There are several CGers that who do that kind of trolling. Mortal V being one culprit. Not saying that is mortal, but he does that kind of stuff all the time. Hmm. No, he doesn't have to help people, but it does leave him open to criticism, and that's fair. Everybody has the right to say that we believe you should help people or promote others. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's no different than saying, like, hey, I believe millionaires or billionaires should do at least some good in the world or should do some charity. No one is saying, hey, you should, like, you have to. Like, it needs to be an obligation, it needs to be forced. That's not what any of us are saying. And I've done videos in the past about the idea of promotion, and my stance is it's not that anyone's obligated to, but people have the right to say that you should do it. Because I believe folks should be promoting one another. If they truly want to counter the mainstream, if they truly want to improve the space, then you would want to not just push your own books, but push other books that you believe are actually respecting the craft, that are actually good for the space, and then calling out stuff that is not good for the space as well. Again, because we're always pushing the narrative that we're trying to force people. And yes, people are competition in the space, but let's be honest. Even if Eric puts out one book a month, that's not enough content for folks. You read a comic in an hour, maybe 2 hours, right? So you're talking 12 to 24 hours out of thousands of hours per year. It's not enough content to keep people busy. So my perspective on the space is that, like, hey, even though I write novels, right, which could take several hours to read, could take weeks to read, that still leaves another, 50 odd number of weeks left where people need content. So why not share other works that are in line with yours, or that could provide entertainment? That's why I typically do the BA recommend segment. And it could be mainstream films and comics, because right, everybody's looking for good content. They're looking for entertainment. And it's becoming harder and harder to find new entertainment because there's just not as good comics and films, at least not in large quantities as it was in the past. So why not let people know about stuff that you enjoy so they can get some enjoyment out of it too? I mean, that's been kind of the norm in history, to like share the things that you enjoy and that you're passionate about with friends and with others so that they can share in that enjoyment as well. Let's see, so there was sorry about my voice here. Saw that JJ Trujillo released a video today. You could check that out. You can find it. Yeah, JJ does some great videos. He's a very, very well spoken, smart guy. A lot of his stuff shows up on Trashcast and all of that. But yeah, highly recommend folks subscribe to his channel as well. Find that video. There we go. Yeah, not too long. Let me try to catch up with the chat a little bit before we jump into that. Give my voice a little bit of a break. hmm Still trying to set up a stream to counter mine so they can EFAP me and try to cancel me, right, based on their logic. Any criticism is cancellation. Larry's been trying to cancel me for weeks now. But it's not working well. I've been selling a decent amount of books in the last couple of weeks. So, I don't know, you got to try harder, I guess. Christopher Bouchard, welcome. Thanks for joining. And actually, before I forget, of course, I should promote my campaign. It does close next Wednesday, so you have basically a week to back Vigilantes Creed. Between Fund My Comic and Indiegogo, we are just shy of $14,000. So it'd be great to hit that mark. And yeah, we're only $170 away from 12.5K on Indiegogo, which is fantastic. So we've tripled the funding since closing out of the initial 60 days. So appreciate everyone's support thus far. As I've mentioned, every single dollar that I raise is going directly into the first comic issue. Hopefully we'll have a sign up page by summer for that. Maybe have the campaign kicked off in 2025. Trying to get as much of the comic done before starting the campaign, but we'll see how things go. As most of you know, it's 2 novels and a mini comic about a gargoyle and a team of vigilantes fighting terror in Detroit. Terror, which is headed by a man named Incubus, who has unearthed a Nazi-era mind control serum that is allowing him to build an army of super soldiers to take over Detroit and beyond. This is definitely for fans of gritty works such as Frank Miller and Alan Moore, street level vigilantism, and just a tale of dark vengeance, but also an emotional tale that has a love story baked into there and a lot of biblical and supernatural lore. So pick these up while you can. These premium versions may not be available in the future, with printing costs going up severely compared to when I started the campaign. And I'll also be moving here in the near future. There's a good chance that they will not be available in the future. So please snag them up while you can. We also have a massive original art piece by Skunk Artworks of the wraparound cover here. So you can check that out, as well as a 3-piece art bundle by Elliot Rodriguez. So snag those before it's too late. All right, let's check out this video by JJ Trujillo. So yeah, again, make sure you subscribe to his channel. This one is labeled Eric Destroyed Ethan ? Let's check this out.
Young Bullet says, are we still at war with Young Rippa? We're not at war with him at all. You know, not at all. I'm not fighting him one bit. I don't want to harm his business. What I did to clarify was I just said, I'm out of this idea that if I have to, how do I explain this? If my associating with people who he doesn't like means that I'm going to be in trouble, then I got to be out of this situation. I got to just say, look, we're not like that. Like, I'm not going to be enemies with your enemies. Okay. I'm just not. We have 2 different businesses here. And I think he made that clear. I said, you should be supporting other, indie comics. And he said, why would I do that? Like, Marvel and DC don't support each other. I got Rippaverse, you got All Caps, you got these companies. Why would I support? That's not what we do around here. We're different businesses. And I mean, if that's the case, cool. I mean, that's fine. I wish him well. I want him to do well, but I'm not going to be somebody who's, your enemies or my enemies. It's like, well, the very least situation, like if we're going to be like that, can you retweet some Comicsgate campaigns? If we're like that, but we're not like that. So, that's just the way it's going to be. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be like, if you're not cool with Eric, then you're not cool with me. He ain't CG. That's a quicker way of putting it. Thank you, Matt. But yeah.
Which that's ironic now that Matt seems to be trying to court Eric, right, to get a job at Rippaverse now that he is super anti-CG. So, oh, how times change. It's funny.
Wish him well. I don't want him to do badly. I want him to do fine. It's just I had to kind of come out and say, look, yeah, like don't expect that kind of loyalty from me. I'm not going to do that. So that's how it is. Jose M, is anyone even excited for Alpha Core? Here we go. $10 a month for a 30-minute early access. Get the fuck out. Lol, Dick Masterson's making more sense every day. All right. Well, thanks for $5 anyway. Yeah, I don't want to run down Eric July's business at all. There's competition. Those guys kind of took a shot at us, and they should, because of our bag and board issue last week. They took a kind of a veiled shot at All Caps Comics. That's fine and good. I don't want to sit there and join in, actually pulling down his business at all. That's not where I'm coming from. I will say, though, our books are good. That's all I want to say.
A lot has changed from October of 2023, back when that live stream was made. Something I've documented a lot on this channel is a conflict between Ethan Van Sciver and Eric July. This had all started because of a Yellow Flash stream where Flash decided to talk about how Dick Masterson had criticized Eric July's book.
Let me get a couple super chats here. I got another Rumble rant for 20 from Dharma. Hey, Nina, you look great as usual. Will we get to hear about your fight between you and Dick? And I don't mean your husband's. Lol.
Hi, thank you. And I don't know. Depends on Flash wants to talk about it. It's his show.
I think he was probably expecting everybody to say that the book was perfect or that Dick was completely wrong, but that isn't exactly what ended up happening.
I think a lot of those notes were accurate. I read it. I might be the only one here who actually read the book when I got it. Why didn't anybody read this? Why everybody?
Yeah, and that was the fact that a lot of the folks that were uber hyping ISOM 1, a lot of the folks just realized, like, they're not even talking about the actual book or the characters or why they think it's so great. It's just constantly about, like, it was just generic. It's awesome. It's raised this amount of money. And I think it poked a hole in the legitimacy of a lot of the people. And, Dick basically blew that hole wide open. And I mean, Ethan had a really, I mean, tame approach to this. And he was just saying, like, hey, some of the stuff is accurate, like he could learn from it. Um, it was extremely, like, tame. But Eric couldn't even handle the tame criticism at that point.
Was so excited for it. People didn't read it.
Eric wasn't very happy with Ethan's criticism.
I heard you talking, Ethan, about this whole like this guy in his review or criticism was excellent. That's bullshit. We read through it ourselves. And it's not excellent. It was literal lies built within it. There's one thing to be critical of something, and I'm perfectly fine with that. You've never seen me jump down anybody's throat for saying, "Hey,
well, what you're saying,
for example, hold on." So,
and told Ethan the next day that he wasn't defending him enough and would soon start reciprocating.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, what Eric could have done, I mean, if possible, right, was to, again, show and not tell. Instead of saying that the review was filled with lies, show how it was filled with lies. Show where in the ISOM book, it counters a lot of the aspects of Dick's review, but he didn't do that from what I can remember. But that would have silenced a lot of those who ended up critiquing him, as if he would have just showed how invalid Dick's review was. But that didn't happen. And so a lot of folks started actually analyzing the ISOM book based off of Dick's notes. And then they realized, like, yeah, this makes sense. And Dick was spot on with a lot of his criticisms.
It's a tricky thing, man. It's never like, well, I'm on one guy's side. I'm on the truth side. I'm on my opinion side of things.
And I'm gonna start acting accordingly with that type of stuff as well, right?
What you mean by that?
That's how I'm gonna start handling folks in this space, because now I guess the way I'm seeing it is I give people way too much the benefit of the doubt as well. So
I think that was the warning of the night letter. That's what I mean. That was almost a hint of it right there.
I'm gonna start maneuvering as such.
He also later sent him this text message in which he said that he was playing middle of the road with someone who was trying to publicly defame him. Eric said, "I do not use my platform to amplify narratives that go against others I'm cool with. Everybody I do shows/streams with knows not to bring up any gripes with people I'm cool with, as I will not give it the time of day. I'm going to start reciprocating on that." Let's listen to how Ethan felt after receiving that message.
It doesn't depend on kind of getting along with a lot of people in this sphere. Some people are kind of, you don't really need them. Some people are troublemakers that you don't really need, and et cetera, et cetera. But Eric July shares my audience. So I get this message from him, and it was just like basically saying, I could quote it. I might as well quote it first. Let me just see it and pull it up so I don't get it wrong. This is no fun, but it had to be done.
As he mentioned, at that time, he and Eric July shared an audience. Think of it as two people yanking on the same piece of cloth. Eventually it's going to tear, and both sides are going to lose a large portion of it, and one will keep a larger portion than the other. It makes sense he was scared because this could cause some adverse effects on his business. And recently I had time to sit down with Ethan Van Sciver, and I got to ask him a question to see if this conflict with Eric July had really negatively affected his sales. Let me play that clip now so we can hear what he has to say. So, Ethan, I don't know if this is too personal of a question, but earlier he was talking about making a lot of money from Eric. Like, have you seen a negative change in your campaigns since this all started about a year ago?
I don't know. I think my campaigns do exactly what I think they're going to do all the time.
Okay.
It's like I start a campaign and like I'm so good at this. I've been doing this for a long time. I read everybody else's campaigns. It's very rare where I'm kind of disappointed or shocked by what a campaign brings in. And it's usually on behalf of someone else. Like I started warts and all, and I said it's going to make $50,000, and it ended up doing like 100.
Right.
So it's always better than I think it's going to do. I haven't noticed. I've noticed an uptick in my viewership, which is really, really cool. And when I ask people to buy things, they do. So I haven't really noticed a negative. Yeah, I mean, it could be coming. I mean, people could be like, you know what? I hate the drama. I wish this would end. But I haven't seen it happen yet. It could be on its way. And, also, I just think everybody's crowdfunds are suffering right now, just in general.
Yeah, definitely. The economy is super horrible. Here, Ethan didn't really give a super direct answer as to whether or not this conflict had harmed him. He said that his campaigns are more or less producing what he felt that they should be. And somebody made a sales chart which graphed the metrics for each of his campaigns. The conflict with Eric started after the launch of Cyberfrog 3, which performed better than Cyberfrog 1, but not as well as Cyberfrog 2. Overall, we see that his campaigns are generally performing higher than when he first started, but not as well as he was shortly after Cyberfrog 2. That may also have something to do with the state of the economy. Cyberfrog 2 was launched in May of 2020. Back then, more people had money in their pockets. More people were also at home and watching YouTube. And in March, just 2 months prior, there
That seemed like it's at least like maybe 4+ million. So that's very, very impressive.
were also stimulus checks, giving everybody an extra $1,400. I'm sure that largely increased the amount of money people were throwing at crowdfunding campaigns. To me, it seems, at least, that this hasn't really hurt his sales, but to know for sure, we'd have to see what will happen when he launches Cyberfrog 4. So now you might be wondering, well, what's happened to Eric July's sales, and has this conflict hurt him? Let's take a quick look at what Ethan and Shane Davis have to say on a recent live stream.
So this is Trashcast. This is the effect. See these little tiny. This is the effect that Trashcast has had on Rippaverse.
Let's give you a little wiggle room. Let's say we don't know that.
That's what I would say though, because I would say the effect that Trashcast has had on the Rippaverse is, I would take credit for this. And not just Trashcast, but also the critics. I would say all of us together, detractors.
I would say his bad comics caught up with him.
Yes, of course, but they would never have caught up with them if it wasn't for detractors saying, you guys aren't reading them. Read them. And then people reading them. And then detractors coming in and basically leveling the forest. I mean, that's what this looks like. You know what I mean? This looks like the first half of the chart looks like Los Angeles 4 years ago. The second half looks like Los Angeles right now. Palisades. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? All right. That's all I'm saying. So here is Geeks and Gamers. This is Jeremy coping.
It's dwindling massively. It used to actually have traction.
Hold on.
A whole fucking network of hate of him. And it's dwindling massively. It used to actually have traction, but it's on life support at this point in time. And
so we're on life support. Criticism of Eric July at this point is on life support, and Eric is soaring because we have I don't know, we're not effective anymore. Our criticism of him.
Ethan was eager to take credit for Eric's plummeting sales, something which Shane advised him not to do. The strange part to me is that once upon a time, Ethan was actually rooting for Eric July. We can see this huge drop between ISOM 1 and 2, but Ethan actually predicted a much different outcome.
Alpha Suma for $20 says, please pass this to Eric. 3.7 is an odd number. I'd like to see him at 3.8. Well, thank you, but I'm going to keep your $20. And yes, I agree. I think he's going to get 4.2 with issue 2. That was my prediction.
He also predicted Yaira sales to be 2 million. They did manage to get 1.5, but it was mostly stagnant at 1.2 until Eric released a new statue. Overall, Eric's graph is much easier to interpret. Each project has resulted in declining sales. To me, it's clear this conflict has led to a decline in sales, but I actually thought it would affect Ethan more than it has. So while Ethan was scared after receiving that message from Rippa back in September of 2023, it seems that he actually had no reason to worry at all. Also, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, or
You are a hoe ass.
So yeah, everybody, please go subscribe to JJ Trujillo's channel. And yeah, thank you for everybody for being here and for having fun in the chat with the agitators. I see they have launched a stream to try to cancel me. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. I don't believe that. But I mean, they only have like 8 people watching, and geez, we're tripling them despite Trashcast going on right now. So I guess their chat or their YouTube is of lower quality, even though they have over 1,000 subscribers. So I guess we showed them. But yeah, if you guys are interested in Trashcast, go check that out. It's live right now. Still got to figure out how to do the whole raid thing, but yeah, go jump in there, let them know that I sent you, and yeah, have a great night. Please check out the Vigilantes Creek campaign. It will close out next Wednesday. I plan on doing another Dark Horse Discourse next Tuesday. Maybe I'll close out on this channel next Wednesday. Not sure. Gonna try to get on as many channels as I can. Try to do a final push for this campaign, and then that'll be it next Wednesday. So thank you everybody for your support, for being here, and God bless. Have a good night.